Dekanosidze is the Eurasia consultant, at Equality Now, and she joins me now live from Tbilisi. Thanks so much for being with us. So, 3 times more domestic work than men before the pandemic. How bad is it really right now from what your studies have shown?
Thanks so much for having me. Thanks so much for your attention to this very important issue. COVID-19 has indeed exacerbated the existing gender inequalities here in Georgia and throughout the world. And even before the pandemic, in Georgia and in other parts of the world, it's a global statistic that women were already doing 3 times more work, more domestic and unpaid care work at home than men. And this has been exacerbated a lot during the pandemic. And a lot more women than men here in Georgia have lost their jobs as a result of the pandemic. And the studies show that while women's domestic work and care work is increasing, men's leisure work is also leisure time is also increasing. So this really is something that wipes out the progress we have achieved during the past few years for gender equality in Georgia. And we are indeed facing new challenges in our struggle towards equality. A lot of women here in Georgia have a feeling that we went back to the 1990s when the Soviet Union had just dissolved and women's rights movement was emerging. This has a detrimental impact indeed in Georgia and throughout the world. We will indeed need a lot of years to go back to the place where we were when the pandemic started.
Okay. You mentioned Georgia. That's obviously your home and an area you specialize in. But tell us where else you're really seeing the most notable differences between the gender equality gap growing rather than shrinking.
Well, this is particularly evident in countries where the legislation does not provide basic protections against violence against women and domestic violence. In Eurasia, for example, it's particularly true in Russia, Belarus, and Turkmenistan. These countries, even though the pandemic has shown that gender violence against women is increasing and women are at increased risks of domestic abuse, these countries are still not taking any measures to put in place domestic violence laws. Even though we have increased risks of women to be subjected to discrimination, including gender-based discrimination and discrimination based on pregnancy and other conditions that are related to women, a lot of countries most of the countries in the region still lack anti-discrimination laws. And in other parts of the world, for example, in Malawi, women are reporting to be exposed to increased risks of being engaged in prostitution, and girls are forced onto the streets to earn their living. Another very important legal challenge that countries throughout the world are facing is that not everywhere buying sex from a minor is a criminal offense. Online sexual exploitation is also increasing since children of school age are now spending more time with computers since classes are being conducted online. And this gives the opportunity to abusers to undertake some novel methods of accessing the victims.
Right. It's a horrific picture in some parts, but has there been any upside to this, and that some mothers may be appreciating being able to spend more time at home and possibly reconnect, with their children, or has the downside just outweighed all of that?
Well, I think for some women do appreciate spending more time with their children, but it also heavily impacts women's employment status and heavily impacts the obligations that women have to fulfill as a result of their jobs. While many women would say that they oftentimes lack the time spent together with their minor children, now there's an increasing number of women who do say that this situation indeed hinders them from career advancement. And this indeed has also shown that childcare services are essential services that the governments have consistently been overlooking as such.
Okay.
And this situation also very heavily impacts women who have children with disabilities. And before the pandemic, these children were able to access services from care centers. And now even these care centers are conducting their services online.
Wow. Okay. Tamar Dekanosidze, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for taking the time. We appreciate it.